Greetings. Welcome everybody. We really don't have a name for what we're doing this evening. We have 6 Americans who have volunteered to come together and have a discussion, and this is what it's about. The agenda has 2 points. We're going to begin talking about perspectives. We're going to go around the horn. Everybody's going to share a little bit about who they are and what their Floyd experience was, how they reacted or interacted with individuals over the last couple of weeks. And then we're going to transition this over into solutions. We've got a wide, varied backgrounds in the group this evening. And I expect we'll hear a lot of great ideas on the way that people have already engaged, not just in the last 2 weeks, but have engaged for their lifetimes in serving each other and helping to make the world a better place. 2 Saturdays ago, I got connected a little bit before that with a Facebook group called What's Happening in St. Charles. And I did that for a friend of mine who owns a business who's a local retailer and needs marketing assistance. And so I got involved to help him. And there was that Saturday morning, it was about 11 o'clock. There were a lot of pictures that were going up from the protest. I believe the protest had just taken place in St. Charles the day before, that Friday. Started in Aurora and worked its way up the Fox River Valley. And I was interacting with 20, 30 individuals who were upset that the pictures were being taken down, who were, I would say, a little wound up, a little emotional about what was going on. And I challenged them, and one of them came back to me, a young man, and said, "So what could we do about it?" And that was the genesis for me putting out an invitation for everybody who's on this evening to respond to that invitation, and for us to come together to have a civil discourse. It's intended based on our backgrounds that we're not going to agree on everything. We're going to agree to disagree on some points possibly. But I believe with what I've seen so far, we've got some good-hearted, well-intentioned people who are actually engaged, are actually deploying action, being intentional in the way that they're trying to make a difference. And so let's start off going around the horn. Lori, I want to start with you. Share a little bit about who you are, and really the last 2 weeks, how has it impacted you and what has it meant to you?
Sure, Lance. My name is Lori Linkamer. I am mother of someone on this panel. Lindsay Hawkins is my oldest daughter. You will notice we don't look a little bit alike, not a bit. That's okay. Our hearts have been alike for a long, long time. 34 years. So I am an ex-teacher, taught school for 25 years, public school, Christian school, and retired in 1998 and became a real estate managing broker for a company here in St. Charles. Lindsay's my oldest. I have 2 other children that we've also adopted into our home, Kirsty and Adam, and 5 beautiful grandchildren, 2 great sons-in-law. It's a real good life. How this has been for the last couple of weeks, as a mom, you want to always think that mother's love can fix anything. And there's times it can't. And so this has been a very difficult, prayerful time for my husband, Mike, and myself. We've thought greatly about what we can do differently, what we can add to the mix, what we can say to people. So easy to want to call people out. And that, of course, isn't the right thing to do. As a Christian, I know that I have to pray for them, be honest with them, and help lead them rather than alienate them. It has been knowing that my children have been involved in protests both here in Illinois and our son in California. It's been a rough few weeks for all of them, but I'm so proud of the fact that they're all speaking up. Everybody's doing what they can do at this time, telling the truth, telling their story. And that of all things for me this evening is to be here with Lindsay while she tells her story. And any of the pieces that I can fill in on the back end. I heard her speak last week and she said she's sure there are things that her dad and I did not talk to them about at the time or open them up to, that we were maybe being a bit protective of them and that we tried to shield them from things. And I thought about that a lot in the last week, and she's right. There are some things, but I think that's what moms and dads tend to do when our people are little and we love them and we want what's best for them. So very glad to get this opportunity to speak in this group tonight, but also to come alongside her and give her support in this endeavor. She's working hard always has worked hard to be the best possible leader she can be in her school, with her teams, in her family. So I'm very glad to have that opportunity.
Awesome. Well, Lindsay, you're up on a pedestal. Share a little bit about your background, and of course, we'd love to have your perspective as well.
Yeah, so I'm Lindsay Hawkins. I am an English teacher at St. Charles North High School. I'm also the volleyball coach there. And my husband and I live in St. Charles, and we have 3 kids who go to St. Charles schools, and my husband is a counselor at St. Charles East. So we're really invested in our community. I have lived here my entire life, only really going away to college and then away for a couple of years after getting married to go get my master's and allow my husband to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. So upon moving back here, like I said, we both became very invested in this community, and it means a lot to us. I think, like my mom talked about, I have obviously, like, my sister and brother and I were adopted, and so we really didn't know all the time about like racist attitudes, because I think my parents kind of shielded us from that, and they really tried to protect us from anything that might, make us feel different. And so I think maybe the first time that I realized that I had brown skin, or that I had a different color skin from my classmates, was when a classmate asked me if I tasted like chocolate. So I don't think I even really realized it. And a big part of that was because of my parents. And then another big part of it was just because I had really awesome friends for a long time who didn't treat me like I was different and didn't really, think anything different of me. So I think it was when I became a mom that it really started hitting home, everything that's going on in the world and how important it is to kind of have these conversations. Because for me, it's not really about me, it's about my kids. And it's about making this world a better place for my kids to grow up in, and making sure that we are coming together and, making some change for a good positive way. So I just think that, this is a great opportunity. I was excited about it. And so thank you so much, Lance, for having me.
Excellent. Absolutely. Morgan, you get the Courageous Award for volunteering faster than anybody else. I will say, of your generation, I tried especially hard to get a young man to join us. Had interactions with several, but you, again, get the Courageous Award. I couldn't get any of them to stand up. So would you please share what inspired you to volunteer to join this so quickly? And then what's your background? How do you serve today?
Sure. I wouldn't necessarily consider myself courageous. I've thrown myself into a lot of situations and conversations for years now that have either felt uncomfortable or been uncomfortable to challenge my views and my opinions and my beliefs with a lot of things. And so I decided to reach out and join this because I think, one, listening and learning is one of the best things to be doing right now. And so to be a part of that conversation and really just learn about everyone's experiences and how that contributes to who they are and how they see the world is really important to working with people. My background is in cross-cultural communications and international relations. And so I've spent a lot of time exploring other cultures and religions and how they see the world and how they interact with it. And going to school and living with international students and working on issues related to the Hispanic community, and really being an advocate in that space. The last few weeks have shown me that I do have those blind spots when it comes to the Black community in the US, that I haven't spent as much time learning about their experiences and their life stories as much as I have other communities. And so coming forward and with those vulnerabilities and hoping to learn more and explore more is really why I'm here. professionally work for People's Resource Center in Wheaton as their grant writer. And so I spend a lot of time looking at how, as nonprofits, we serve communities and how racial injustices have contributed to poverty and other systems that we see every day. And then trying to bring those conversations to them to figure out what can we be doing better? How can we be serving and honoring our community better?
Excellent. Thank you, Morgan. I'm going to hand the ball to Dino. You represent the police industry in our conversation this evening from a background perspective. Please share.
Yeah, so I can really resonate with each of you. It's interesting, Morgan, you said you have an international background. So, that was part of what you were sharing. So my grandmother was born in Guatemala. So I'm first generation born in this country. And my stepdad was born in Vienna, Austria. And I was also adopted. And my stepdad had raised me and honorably, and have a great relationship with my stepdad. And just recently I met my biological father, and he's born in Greece. So there's like a multicultural thing going on here. Just a little background again, with my grandmother coming from Guatemala, she came here in 1940 something, right? And she noticed that there was nothing culturally about Guatemalan or Hispanics in the Chicagoland area. So with the education that she earned, literally, I would hear the stories over and over again that she studied hard on a dirt floor by candlelight. And anytime I wanted to go and play, you would like this, educators, I would be tested on my timetables. And so I'm thankful for those disciplines. But here is my grandmother, and she comes through the country here, and always had a love for Guatemala, and relationship building with her broken English, but speaks it and understands it. She built relationships with Mayor Daley Sr. and with other civic leaders, where she was then asked to be the tourist attaché in the 70s. And then she was invited to have lunch with John F. Kennedy when he visited Chicago, and Queen Elizabeth. And my grandmother went to heaven a year ago. She lived to be 101, and she knew her timetables all the way up to the last breath before she went to God's glory. So I give that background because I grew up in that world view, you see, and my stepdad being Austrian. They didn't want me to be a police officer at all because her experiences were not very positive in Central America, and did everything we can just by bribing me not to be in law enforcement. But, you know, God put it in my heart ever since I was a little boy. And so I was given that opportunity, and been serving there for 30 years, and just recently completed my career. As I said earlier, I'm now working at another agency as a public information officer and community relations. I instruct at a police academy. So this is not about a resume, but it's about sharing with you that I definitely see the world differently through the lens of law enforcement. But more importantly, a biblical lens, really. And I just want to offer a perspective tonight and how it affected myself with George Floyd. More or less, I'm going to speak from the heart. This is going to be very organic. And I have a nice sense here that we're here for a purpose, which is unity. So, in police work, I wouldn't say I'm used to the violence, but I was trained to be optimal in the violence. And it was a definitely horrific and violent and tragic event that occurred with Mr. Floyd. And I grieve for that. I grieve also reminding myself, putting on the uniform and asking God to prepare my hands for battle, because there are many times where I didn't know if I was going to come home at night. And it's a gift. It's a gift to be able to pursue justice. It really is, to be fair and equitable. And speaking Spanish, I was able to reach the Hispanic community. So I enjoyed that so much, and bringing perceptions. The other part of my answer about the George Floyd incident was also it put into light, and I'm going to just put it out there, for this specific incident, as of yet, I haven't seen or read in the professional law enforcement community anything that was racially motivated. Social media of the officers involved have been scrubbed, and I'm not excusing the death of Mr. Floyd. Please, please, please understand me. I am not. I just want to offer a perspective. So here's what really got me: how quick it jumped from a brutal arrest that a person died in custody, a human being died in custody. I can guarantee you those officers did not get up that morning and couldn't wait to kill someone, let alone a black person. I always give officers the benefit of the doubt. I myself in my career had the challenge to arresting a law enforcement for breaking the law. So, and I've held officers accountable. I was in a supervisory position for 15 years, so quality control is important. So getting back to what weighed heavy on my heart was the law enforcement community, the community at large, that continued with a narrative that there isn't any hard facts about that narrative. It doesn't take away from a life that's lost. It does not. It does not. I have not yet been an officer. I've taught at several academies. I can tell you from ground zero, Lindsay, if you were at the police academy, or Miss Lori, or Miss Morgan, or even my brother Bob here, from day one, they're going to teach you how to control everything and trust nothing. Because when you call 911 in the chaos, your officer is expected to be optimal in a highly volatile situation. And many times it doesn't happen. Officers overreach, and later on in our conversation, I can get into that. But my heart was heavy. My heart was heavy for all those things there that I've described to you.
And I appreciate that. And you went a couple layers deep, but I appreciate where you went. And I misspoke earlier. We do have a 24-year-old male on this call. Bob, would you share a few things about yourself?
That's a good one. Bob Witt. I am a community engagement specialist for the city of Elgin, and my role is to bring community leaders, police department together to sit at the table to collaborate, to build trust and unity, long-term planning of how we can work together in the city. The thing for me with the George Floyd incident, I mean, I was already relevant, but I became even more relevant just based on what I do. And so I have been on tour, just kind of going to various places. Dino's been a part of that as well. Just sharing and trying to, again, bring a perspective. One of the unique things that people don't know about me, and I think it gives me a little advantage, and I don't want to get too deep into the story, but both of my great-grandfathers were white. But I did not know that until I became an adult. And so I do have a different perspective in the sense of, you know, how, if you ever heard how some people talk about, particularly African Americans, not all, but there's some that say, you know, to a white person, I understand you better than you understand yourself, which in a lot of cases is not true. I mean, it's just out of frustration and anger. But I can literally say that to some extent, a whole lot more than most folks can, because I've had some experience with that. Now, I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, and we stayed with my great-grandmother, who on my mother's side was Blackfoot Indian, and on my dad's side, my great-grandmother was Cherokee. And so on my mom's side, when we would go and visit my great-grandmother, you know, have all the cousins there, all the, you know, nieces and nephews. And what happened was, we saw this white gentleman that would always come in. He'd be there at 8 and he'd leave at 6 every day. And we were trying to figure out, well, who is this guy that kept coming and going? Because you have to remember, I was in a vacuum of Black power, you know, just Black resistance against other things. At one time, I did not like white people. And that wasn't because I came out of my mom's womb that way. It's because there were people that went before me that I was learning from. And so, so this white gentleman would come every day that we would visit. And come to find out, and you know, he treat you like he was your great grandpa. But I always thought he was just, you know, some helping. And then come to find out, as I got a little older, my great grandmother and other family members were trying very hard to kind of keep that discreet from us, because back then he had to leave at 6 o'clock to go stay somewhere else, because he would get beat up. He would be in danger if he was there in the hood after 6 p.m. And how ironic that is, if we've turned the tables, how that was for Black folk. You know, you go into a town, if you're there, you know, you're there at nightfall, you know, you're gonna have some problems. And so back then, you know, your family members tried to do some things to try to protect you, try to, you know, hide some things. Some of those things were secrets, but that's kind of how that played out. But my approach to what has taken place is one that obviously it saddens me, but I'm not surprised. And my concern is that we really have to be careful that with all of what is happening at this point, which I think is, you know, people want to protest and you do it appropriately, go for it. But just, is this going to be another recycling, you know, just a larger level, but is it going to continue to be a recycling where we go through this emotional phase, we go through a phase of, you know, kind of seeing how the court is going to play out. Now with this particular case, it seems like, you know, it's kind of a closed case, but, you know, what's going to happen after all of this? You know, what's going to be the fallout after? And that's the concern that I have, and I hope as we continue to have conversation here, that's something that we can look at.
That's excellent. I appreciate you sharing. Let me throw up a jump ball. You know, part of the environment for the last couple of weeks has been an organization that was actually formed back in 2013, and they have an agenda. They have an agenda well before the last 2 weeks took place. And the name of the organization has become the battle cry, the mantra for a lot of white Americans. And so I'm referencing Black Lives Matter. And the conversations that I've had with individuals is they will say Black Lives Matter, and I will say, why don't all lives matter? And I do all lives matter, not to disrespect anyone in their mind trying to elevate one group up to another. It's as foolish as it sounds to me. I personally care about everybody equal, and I have to do that. That's my desire, which means it takes energy and effort to do that. There are people on this planet that I do not like, and it's not because of their skin color. Usually it's because of their behavior, it's because of their language. So the jump ball here is Black Lives Matter. What does it mean to you? Do you have, you know, your Facebook picture or your Instagram? You have Black Lives Matter around your picture. What's it mean to you? Anybody jump and grab it?
I'll go first. I think just that phrase has become, for a lot of people, something that really triggers them. And I read something the other day where somebody said, why are we not saying all lives matter? And the person responded just kind of saying, yes, of course, all lives matter, but Black lives are being disproportionately hunted down and not mattering. And so all lives cannot matter until those Black lives matter. I'm with you, Lance. I think there's no one life that's greater than another. And for me, that's why I think this has become just, I don't know, the violence now angled towards police officers really, really concerns me. And it really just, it's not getting the message across that, you know, no life is greater than another. And we should all be standing together trying to fix this. And instead, you know, we've got these mantras that are triggering people to then respond with, well, blue lives matter, or, you know, all lives matter. And, you know, it's kind of concerning because it's just dividing us more than we were before. So it is a little bit concerning. And, you know, I grieve for police officers who are going out there now and probably more afraid for their lives than maybe ever before, because there are so many people out there who are just vindictive and deciding that, you know, all police officers are bad. And I think that is just because of things like this saying that people are so triggered by. And it's, like I said, I feel like it's just kind of separating us a little bit more than we were before.
There's a concept called gaslighting, and it for me personally, it's a relatively new term, and it's very simple in its premise. It's somebody is doing something, but they're blaming somebody else for the exact same action. And that's what I'm seeing and we're talking really about our nation's discourse right now. Groups of people, and I'm not going to point out anybody on the political spectrum whatsoever. I have no interest in bringing politics into this, but I see groups of people who are saying, let's all be united. And then they do things that absolutely divide. And I think if we're going to talk about individual responsibility tonight, being aware that that's happening, whether there's, regardless of the power structure or the bent, there are groups of people who gain resources, they gain treasure, they gain power by dividing us or keeping us divided. Morgan, Black Lives Matter, what does that mean to you?
So in talking to a lot of friends of mine over the last couple of weeks, and also interacting with a lot of the clients that we serve, because of coronavirus, even though my job is mostly in an office, I've been on site every other week helping with our food pantry distributions, which have been outside. And I think a lot of it is based on intent and intention behind those phrases. So there are some people who will counter with all lives matter, but then they're really not talking about all lives. They want their life to be included in it. And I've started to reflect more on what exactly it means to say Black Lives Matter. And I think if maybe we had addressed a lot of the inequities and inequalities and discrimination that exists against both Indigenous and Black Americans, then we probably would be a lot farther in that actual equality today if we'd paid attention decades and centuries ago, and if someone had just said, we need to take care of this now. And so I've been reflecting on that a lot lately, as well as trying to understand more of the intent. So one of the volunteers I work with on site, he has a son who is a police officer in Evanston and another who's on the SWAT team with the FBI in Seattle. And he came to volunteer with us and had a bracelet on that said Blue Lives Matter. And from the friends that I've talked to, that's, for them, that comes from a place of fear because of their experiences. And so me then having a conversation with him and asking him, you know, how are your sons doing? How are you processing everything that's going on? Helps me to then figure out more of that relationship, and understanding that someone who sees that might feel really uncomfortable coming to us for something that they really need. And so that's always the perspective that I try to have with it, is how is someone else viewing this? It's not really up to me to decide what it means. It's for me to understand and to be able to put myself in the shoes of others, to be able to then try to understand.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Dino, earlier you started to go down the path with the George Floyd incident. There was some videotape that came out the last few days, and it's from an outside camera, not one of the body cams, but it's an outside camera that's got an angle down on the interactions. And one of the things that I noticed was when George Floyd was handcuffed and being escorted into the police cruiser, he refused entry. And that 3-minute clip is kind of where the altercation started. Recently, we had the Wendy's event down in Atlanta, and there's been a lot of video, body cam video that's come out with that, where there was a very cordial interaction between 2 white police officers and a Black American who, the reality was intoxicated. He blew a number higher than 0.08. I don't think that came through the actual number in the video. I'm sure it'll be in the report. But when it came time to be arrested for driving a vehicle while intoxicated, passing out in the line, and so everybody realizes this, he passed out in the line of the drive-through of the Wendy's, impeding traffic. You watch the interactions, and you didn't see, you saw 3 individuals having a conversation. And as I watched the interactions, I kind of go back and forth. If I could, I'm going to stick my tongue in my cheek and ask you, which week of police academy training did you learn about racism? When were you taught to be a racist? If it's systemic, as we're being told.
So the class that I teach at the police academy are victims, their rights, and patrol police function. Because they're 2 different objectives. And I'm answering your question with this. And in that class, we bring into light data, like data, numbers. And every time I have conversations like this, I just want to encourage all of us, right, to be independent thinkers, go against the grain. If everyone's going in one direction here, at some point we talk about balance, Morgan, and okay, what's really going on here? So I kind of jokingly say I'm a trained observer, right? And it's my wife and children are tired of that. But the reality is, through police work, you observe a lot of things. So I want to answer the first question, get to that question. What is Black Lives Matter? So as the organization, it's a terrorist organization. They're anti-American, they're anti-Black. And what I mean by that is, when you do the research and you see the antagonists, it isn't the First Amendment constitutional of protesting and marching. But you look at that organization and you look at the funding, ask these questions. How did it all happen all at once? So Black Lives Matter was founded years ago, and I'll even give them the benefit of doubt, out of good intentions, out of frustration, because there's a perception there. You mentioned earlier, Miss Lindsay, and I don't take offense to it. I'm thankful for your heart. I'm so thankful for your heart, because this is the third thing that weighs in my heart, is that there's a lot of people there that have that perception, or maybe it's the truth, that they believe that police officers are hunting down minorities, Blacks, myself, Hispanics. And you'd be so surprised that officers have killed by a big number Caucasians, more than Blacks, more than Hispanics, in many, many years. So the BLM is predicated on a false narrative based on the facts. I'll leave that hang there. And I know it's very provocative. I'm not here to instigate at all, but we're here to give a perspective. So I'm speaking this as first generation, very proud, very thankful of my ethnicity. And by the way, let me park here. I don't just say this to bring any credibility, but I'm very proud and very thankful that I've been praying for godly son-in-laws for my daughters. When they were little kids, I'd say, Lord, please bring in a godly, Christ-centered husband for my daughter every day. And God answered our prayer in a big way, because Bob's son married my daughter, and they met at a really cool camp in St. Charles. And so I find it very interesting how you have forgive me, Bob, but I'll just say we all have our stories, our testimony. You have a former person, a person I hung out, former Black Panther, and you got a sergeant, and we're here now together. So I want to bring the praise God and the awness of all this. Now that's my heart. So I know when I say what BLM stands for, I'm letting you know that they have been identified as a terrorist organization. And I believe In fact, I know well-intentioned, good-hearted people pursuing racial reconciliation, which is a mandate, a biblical mandate. Christ died for all of us. And it's because of him that I love everyone. And if I don't, I'm convicted to love everyone in my uniform. Even if it means that in 1 second, things are going cordial, and in a nanosecond, it goes south real quick. And that's what they teach at the academy. So yeah, you're right. There's no academy that teaches any racial profiling. There is criminal profiling, and race, gender, place, action, criminal history. Let me park on there. When you guys arrive on scene, let's just pretend we're all police officers. The dispatch is going to give you the full download on who you're going to contact with, and that's called officer safety. And you're going to know the criminal history, the extent of criminal history. So no one's talking about, there's a certain posture that officers will approach when they are dealing with someone with a criminal history like of Mr. Floyd or Mr. Brooks. I'm not saying that that person then deserved to die. I'm just making a point in a context. So please understand. Mm-hmm. So you have a felon with a firearm. There's a lot of posturing because, as we can see, if you look on the Officer Down Memorial, it's the only memorial in the country that you add more names to it. We had 140 officers that died in line of duty last year, and we're going to break definitely. We're at 100 already. We're not even at the end of the year. And I'm not saying this to play the violin and woe is us. This is the risk, and this is a calling in our heart. And I'm just so thankful by God's grace that I survived my career. So police officers are not trained. They're not encouraged. There is nothing at all that is a systemic. Are there racial police officers? Yes. Are there racial pastors? Yes. Are there racial, listen, racism, racist, pardon me, racist. You see, I told you, Miss English teacher, you're going to catch me. All right. So, that's a sin. That's a sin. Inherently someone's skin doesn't commit that sin. And I'm taking a page out of Bob's book because I pay attention to what he has to say. It's the heart. It's the heart that commits a sin. So the more melanin and the less melanin is not inherent for a privilege, and nor is it inherent that person is a racist by the color of skin. It's their heart. Yeah. So in police work, and I'll conclude with this, is that the BLM is there's a lot of momentum going, and it's being, you have to understand, media, there's a lot of narratives out there. So I just encourage each of you, don't take my word, don't take Dino's word for it, but look at these studies. There's one in particular, I forgot his name, but he's actually a very prominent, if you want to go there, a very prominent Black Mr. Steele, Professor Steele, Dr. Steele from Harvard. And he did this, he was pursuing, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to find out why are my peeps getting hunted down. He found out that was far from the truth, empirical data. So as Christ followers, it's all about racial reconciliation and the power of Jesus Christ.
I appreciate that. Lori, I want to come over to you. You said in the onset that you had raised your children, and for somebody that doesn't know, this is primarily for the St. Charles area, is again how this started. In St. Charles, I don't know the exact number, 98.9% white. This is a rather undiverse area. Can you share your experiences? Did you run into any significant racial issues raising your children over the last 2-3 decades?
Sure. Of course we did. We were very blessed to have a wonderful church community. When we decided we wanted to adopt children, we adopted children that were available. There was no hesitation. Waited 7 years for Lindsay, probably the longest 7 years of my life. She came to us 2 months after a cancer diagnosis on my part. Stage 4, I was not expected to live. And she came to us 2 months to the day of my diagnosis. Best day of my life, except for marrying her dad. That would have been it. I think that I said before, all moms think that mother's love can fix anything. And it never dawned on me that we couldn't prepare our children for what was to come, that we couldn't prepare them for people asking if they taste like chocolate, or, well, you're black, that means you must be the best middle hitter on the team and you must be able to jump higher than anybody else in the volleyball team because you're black. That ought to be it. Something that Lindsay has really brought to my attention that is important as a white woman, I did not do a good enough job, particularly of preparing my son for going out into the world, living in St. Charles. There's been some things over time. He's a good boy, loves the Lord, loves his family. But I remember a conversation he and I had after he got through high school. He was all three of our kids, blessed athletically, musically, great kids, had great friends. And one thing that he said to me that broke my heart after high school was, you know, Mom, it was one thing to be a black athlete in town, be a black kid on the football team. I was pretty good. People liked me. It's really hard to be a black young man in this town. And that was something that has stuck with me all these years. Lindsay talks about having to have the talk, particularly with her two boys, about how to exit neighborhoods, how to behave, things you should say, the correct, polite responses to things. I just thought teaching my son to be a good Christian man was what I needed to teach him. And in truth, there were things that I skipped over because I didn't know better. Now, the Lord gave us these kids to raise. He trusted us. We did the best we could. We love them with our whole hearts. There has never been one moment that they weren't mine. They weren't ours. Yeah, we've had things said. The first time, Lindsay doesn't probably remember, the first time she encountered racism was at a grocery store in St. Charles. First time I'm aware of that I was there for. She came across a man in the grocery store. We passed him. He made a comment about her skin color, and she promptly walked up to him and said, "You must not know Jesus." That was the end of the conversation. She was 3. And her brother and her sister and her mom stood there while she defended the family. You know, those are things that she's always had that character. And those are things that I still look back at today. We prayed, Dino, you made me laugh. We prayed for godly men for our girls. We got 2 of them. How do you beat that, huh? We prayed for godly men to come in and to steal our daughters' hearts. And
That's right.
2 young Christian men that came in and married our daughters and have just been such an asset to our family. And, you know, and then the family expands. You've got Bob. You know, we've got wonderful in-laws for both of our daughters that we enjoy being with them and spending time with them. My big takeaway for myself, and this has nothing to do with my kids, well, it does, but indirectly. Sometimes I can be politically correct. That's my thing. I was an elected official here in town for 12 years. Sometimes rather than get into the mix and say the wrong thing, I maybe have stayed quiet when I shouldn't have. And this can be a little Christian organization here, but I'll tell you what, I've been calling BS lately. I'm done. I'm just done. Don't say things in front of me. Don't write things on my Facebook page. Do not insinuate anything, because I'm going to tell you what I believe to be the truth. And I'm going to plead Jesus's blood all over you, but it's not going to stop me from saying what I need to say. And that's something that maybe I wasn't quite as open to doing that. I'm right there. I am so there. And gosh, when you love your kids, you love your family, you love what they bring to the table, and you know that they are just a small piece of what's going on, but you see what they're bringing to the table and how hard they're working. How can you not come alongside of them and give them everything you got? And for my 3 grandsons who are Black, believe you me, their moms are going to teach them the right things. My 2 granddaughters that are Black, their moms are going to teach them too. They have an uncle that loves them to death. This is a family that's worth reckoning with. And I've always said it did not matter the color of our skin, but it was the content of our character. And I guess you can figure out who one of my heroes is when I say
Yeah, I
this
was gonna say
concept, my character.
that's an awesome
But,
quote.
It is the truth. It
Yeah.
has always been the truth and will continue to be the truth.
Well, speaking of, thank you, Lori. Speaking of color of the skin, Bob, there's something that's been, the term white privilege has been thrown around a lot the last 2 weeks. But I heard something, actually a little twist on that off of what you were saying earlier. I got the feeling that you were sharing white guilt with individuals that you're having conversations with who are approaching this from a guilt perspective. Am I correct? Are you seeing that? And can you elaborate?
Yeah, yeah. First of all, hey, Lori, just want to encourage you in this. I used to tell people when I pastored, and you have family issues with folks and your parents and all of that good stuff. And I used to tell people in my church, I said, I'm so grateful for my parents because they did the best in what they knew what to do.
Yes.
And it sounds like to me, you've done a pretty darn good job.
Amen.
And I just want to encourage you in that. I, like your son, I was kicked out of an all-Black Catholic school. and interesting, because of race, if that makes any sense, but I'll just leave it there. And I was shipped off to Minnesota. So I went from an all-Black school in Cleveland to an all-white school of 1,500 students in Minnesota, in a very small town. And I was an All-American, All-State in sports. And there's this movie called Glory Road. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it.
Yep.
It came out way before I did, but I had that type of experience in the 70s, playing sports. When I was at home on our own home court or our own football field, everybody loved me because I was an athlete who happens to be Black. But when we went on the road or when I didn't have sports even at home, I had to function a whole different way. Mm-hmm. And so I just say that to say, just to encourage you as a mother, I'm not going to suggest that you missed anything. I want to encourage you and just say, I don't think you missed anything. There's just some things in life we just have to let happen. And no one could do anything with that. My own mom couldn't have done anything to help with that cause. So just wanted to encourage you in that. Lance, you had asked a question. Yeah, there's just this, we have swung the dial so far to one side. I don't care which side you want to go. I hate to say right or left because there's a whole political whatever with that, but that I'm just talking about literally swinging the dial to one way or the other, to the extreme, to where we've got so caught up in the last 400 years of injustice, slavery, racism, that the very time that we get to a place where there's some shift in the hearts of people, the people that we have today aren't the people from 400 years ago. And so somehow in society, we've created this, what I would call a demonic portal, that we have our white brothers and sisters feeling this guilt, feeling this, I got to walk on eggshells. All of a sudden now we're changing everything, because of what's happened. They changed Aunt Jemima. They're changing that syrup thing, Uncle Ben's rice. And I'm not knocking any of that, but I'm just saying, if we're going to do that, heck, then Lindsay and I should go to some car dealer who's white in St. Charles and ask him to give us a brand new car because we're Black. But that's the extreme of where this stuff is getting to. And I'm concerned that for those, our white brothers and sisters that are genuinely trying to understand, they're becoming frustrated because it's like, I don't know what else to do. I've tried. You know, I've really tried to try to help. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to understand. And so we find ourselves in this situation, as I shared earlier. You know, I was with some pastors and I just felt the Lord told me, on behalf of those that are not walking in a place of honor, I would like you to ask for forgiveness on their behalf.
Mm.
And when I did that, it was like, oh, Bob, you know, you don't have to apologize. I'm like, well, why not? Oh, well, you know, this is something that we have to do. And one of the things that I don't like is when we have this kind of a racial crisis in our country, whether it's this, whether it's Michael Brown, whether it's the McDonald situation, and other current things that have happened. I don't want to minimize Breonna Taylor and others, but I find the church, particularly our white brothers and sisters, constantly having to repent and ask for forgiveness. And I'm just like, hey guys, that's getting old, you know, to the point that you're beginning to water it down. What I need from you is, how do we go together? How do we journey together? I don't need you to repent anymore, because it's not doing anything for me. You know, it may be doing something for you personally, but it ain't doing anything to help me. And so trying to get in that, you know, Lance, we've talked about this before, about the bear, the grizzly bear, when he gets in this, the river and there's the salmon, they're spawning and they're all going uphill or they're going up the stream. And that grizzly bear gets in that stream, but he faces the other way. And he's going against the flow. Even though he is actually in the flow, he's going against the flow. Well, what happens, it makes it easier for him to catch salmon. A lot of times the salmon are just jumping up to him and it makes it easy. And so my point is, the church, we as individuals, we got to get in that stream and face the other way and begin to go against the grain. Who's going to be there when all these wonderful people have stopped protesting because the media attention's gone, the national attention's gone? Who's going to be there? It'd be great. Let's just say we have 5 million people that are protesting, marching in our country, just to throw out a number. It'd be great if those same 5 million people turned around and start going, knocking on the police doors to say, hey, I want to come and sit down and have conversation with you, to figure out how we can do some things together, to figure out what we need to understand about policing, and then what you need to understand about community. I wish that would happen, but that's not going to happen. And so I'm continuing to push the boundary of trying to help our white brothers and sisters to understand that I don't need them to feel the guilt, because that's not coming from their heart. That's just them feeling a certain way because, you know, people are trying to tell me I need to do something different, but now I find myself in a situation that somebody has had to pay a price for me to get this right. Mm. George Floyd has paid a price. Breonna Taylor has paid a price. Young man Arbery has paid a price for us to get this right. And so at some point, this thing's got to change.
Lindsay, before we switch into solutions, I've got one question for you. The words, going back to the language, the word racism it's lost its effect, either significantly or completely, because it's been so overused. It's been thrown out as an aggressive, an attack word in so many cases, and it's lost its word. But as I think about this, you know, we are the human race. There is only one race of our species on this planet. And so this really isn't about race. This is about culture. I mean, you know, the melatonin in the skin that gives us different hues I've been watching a lot of really great historical interviews. And a recent one that just really struck me was Condoleezza Rice was going through a conversation, and she shared that her genetic makeup, I'm assuming a DNA test, that she was 40% white European, and then went into her history. It was a white grandfather who had relations with a slave, and this, I think, was actually at the great grandfather level back in the 1800s, and she is the prodigy or the product of that lineage. But if you look today, there was another with Morgan Freeman, and he was having a conversation, and he said, "Stop calling me an African American. I'm not." He said, in fact, he took it another level deeper. He said, "Stop calling me a black." He was being interviewed by Wallace, and he said, "Stop calling me a black American. Just call me Morgan Freeman." To get it down to we're individuals, we just happen to be a little different. Now, Lindsay, for you growing up in predominantly white St. Charles and having these experiences, is it a culture difference for you, or how does race and culture, the differences, how does that impact you personally?
Yeah, actually, it's funny, as you were saying that story about Morgan Freeman, I was thinking my husband was just watching a Bruce Lee documentary the other day, and a guy asked him, do you want to be seen as the next great Asian American? And he said, no, I want to be seen as a human. Like, call me a human, because we are all the same. And it's actually this great documentary about how he just kind of set out to show people that we are all the same. And so yeah, I totally agree that we are all one race, and these things are not programmed into us. We're not born to hate each other. I think, Dino, you said it the best, that this is something that we're taught, and it's a reflection of our heart. It's not a reflection of our skin color. It's a reflection of just our heart is in the wrong place. And so, yeah, for me, I think that growing up, like I said before, it wasn't really all that apparent to me that I was different, because I had great parents who didn't allow me to think that I was different. And I had a great group of friends who also didn't treat me any different. So what has become, I think, Bob, you were talking about it too, when you were talking about being an athlete, that just sometimes America picks pieces of Black culture to celebrate when it's convenient for them. So whether it's dancing or rap music, when it is convenient, we've picked pieces of Black culture to kind of try to emulate. And I guess for me, it's always been about don't look at me and say, oh, I'm Black, so I must be this good athlete, or I must be a good dancer, or maybe I'm a good singer. Get to know me for me, because I am just a human, and and we probably have more alike and more in common than we have different. And it's not really just about what I'm bringing to the table. And I feel like that's something that we have to change about Black culture, is this idea that what can they bring to America. So yeah, I think it's like you said, we're all one race. We are the human race, and we've got to figure out how we can do better together, and we've got to figure out how we can walk alongside each other.
Excellent.
Lance, can I jump on that real quick?
Please.
Just an extreme example. First of all, I appreciate how you have articulated saying Black Americans. I've appreciated that. I've never been down with African American, and I'll tell you why. My wonderful father-in-law, my wife is white, and so my wonderful father-in-law, his parents were missionaries in Africa. He was born in Africa. So when I do racial reconciliation training, I often say to people that I am Black. I'm not African American. And I will tell them about my father-in-law being the original African American because he was born in Africa. And I think we can get too caught up in the social aspect of things that now we need to have a title to validate who we are. Guys, I'm Black and I was born in America. And that's it. You know, but you can see how interesting that can be. You know, because my father-in-law was born in Africa, so he is an African American. I'm just somebody Black who was born in America, and I think we can overdo it too much with titles. So anyway, I just say I appreciate how you have proceeded to address the Black community in that regard. Not that I would have had a problem with you saying African American, but just I am Black and I'm an American, period.
Awesome. We have an obligation collectively to everybody who's watching this or will watch this to come forth with solutions and ideas. I don't ever want to do anything where we're not collaborating to make our species, our planet, a better place to live. And it's part of my challenge those 2 Saturdays ago. Quit your whining. And first of all, go protest 365 days a year. I don't care. When he gets into rioting and all the other things that we saw, those were bad actors taking advantage of what was a good protest. And so, unfortunately, those things happen in life. But as Bob said and Dino said, the emotions are going to come out of this. The pendulum's going to swing back, and it's going to be, so what did we do? Or what could we do coming out of this? And so jump ball, who has some ideas they'd like to share with the audience on ways to engage, solutions that can be done at the individual level?
So Citizens Police Academy, this COVID will settle down hopefully sooner than later. But I'd encourage each of you to check out your municipality, your local municipality. It's 2 hours a night, maybe 3 for 6 weeks. Bring your criticism, bring your questions, bring everything. And what a great opportunity. And I look at this as a selfish perspective because law enforcement, you know, you have like maybe 900,000 police officers in the country. The population in America is what? It's a lot, right? 328 million or something like that.
Okay.
So, you know, and out of that, there's like 375 million contacts a year. And they're never like invited to parties or family gatherings. We know that the job is when people are in crisis. So when there's a Citizens Police Academy class and you choose to sign up and you get to see from A to Z, literally the curtains pulled back and you can participate in the class and you can see how police are trained. Well, my prayer and my hope is that the officers are energized, because I'll speak from my experience in 30 years. There was a big part of my career, you know, the first 5 years I would do it for free. And they would do brain scans. You're so excited about the job. The endorphins are kicking. I mean, seriously, your brain chemistry is well, you can be sleep deprived, rocking and rolling, having a good time. And around the 5th year, and this is a known syndrome in mental health for officer wellness, between the 5th year and the 10th year, that's 5 years where the trajectory of controlling everything and trusting nothing, it becomes so focused where it becomes, instead of being optimal, you are hyper vigilant. So everybody is the knucklehead. And when there's a Citizens Police Academy class, officers can be like a pit stop. I look at law enforcement officers as a NASCAR engine, as a power engine, right? But even they need a pit stop. So the citizens can come and meet the police officers. Police officers can then meet with the citizens, and all of a sudden it's relationship building. You know, it's not money, it's not a program, it's relationship building. The other 2 action items I have is as a recommendation to check out Citizen Police Academy. But, you know, years ago, as a matter of fact, the NAACP put out a brochure about, like everyone talks about the talk, you know, the talk.
No,
Well, this was an educational brochure, and all those attributes transcend for any parenting when a young person is taking their license. And how cool would it be if there would be legislation, like educators, you know, you experience a lot of things changing that were good things to have, and now by law you have like Aaron's Law, right? Aaron's Law, where it's somewhere in 8th grade or during health class where students are taught and mandated by the state, right, the educational board, that they have to report or how to report your abuser. Well, how cool would it be if there was a legislation about the talk for everyone? For everyone, because here's the other side of it. You know, the talk, you have to ask yourself, why are we having the talk? Some people think, oh, because minorities and blacks are targeted, and I want to protect my loved one from being targeted. I would challenge that person. You're taking, it's predicated off of a false narrative. How about we have the talk where officers are trained to be suspicious of everything and cautious of everything. Every stop, every car they stop, look what we saw. We don't know who's going to attack us. So why don't we help motorists to mitigate so that the officer doesn't have to have what is called escalating suspicion? You see? So how neat would it be? So I had my conversations with my daughters. You had the blessing and maybe the curse of having a dad that was a sergeant, okay? I think their boyfriends would tell you it was probably a curse. But anyways, my daughters, I would tell them, you know, 10 and 12, put the dome light on, all the windows down, and be polite, be polite, be polite. And I told them, you're probably gonna get an officer. It was a bad day. They're gonna have a case of an attitude. I'll give everyone the benefit of the doubt. They got off a bad call, maybe an infant death, maybe something weighing on their heart. Not an excuse for unprofessionalism, not an excuse for bad behavior, absolutely not. But I said, girls, that's not the time. You want to circle back around, go to the station, meet with the supervisor, express yourself. So it would be a Citizens Police Academy. How neat would it be that in this reform, you know, instead of defunding, let's talk about revision, revising the industry. How cool would it be if instead of calling it the talk, that it would be a part of driver's ed, decorum. How do you conduct yourself in a traffic stop? And it would probably increase a person from not getting cited, to be honest with you, because most of my experience is people would get cited because of their attitude. They talk themselves into it. So, but yeah.
Dino, I taught all of my girls, 10 and 2, yes sir, yes ma'am, no sir, no ma'am. And what my 19-year-old got pulled over just 2 weeks ago. Carol Stream. So I've got a ticket in the next room I need fixed. We'll talk about that after the meeting. 160 bucks. What was that about?
Good thing this is not being recorded.
That's right. No audiences here. Great. We appreciate those solutions. I got them written down. That's awesome. Morgan, what ideas do you have for everybody watching this?
So I'm going to respectfully push back a little on some of what Dino was talking about. As someone who really focuses on listening and having conversations and understanding experiences, that is what I have encouraged others to do. It is what I've pushed myself to do. It is not for us to say that if a group of people are having a bad experience with something, whether it's the police or whether it's bad customer service at a local place, that's something that needs to be addressed. And we shouldn't be saying that, we shouldn't be dismissing someone else's truth just because it's not ours. And so I encourage everyone to listen to those people whose experiences are completely different from you, because I personally don't think that it's on citizens to understand how to interact with police. I truly believe that when people are already when they already distrust them. I think everyone needs to do some really hardcore reflecting and being in uncomfortable situations with themselves and really digging deep as to why certain things make you uncomfortable, or why you feel like this isn't your problem, or why certain conversations make you more uncomfortable than others. And as someone who works in a nonprofit sector and who knows, as the grant writer of an organization, that in DuPage County that has a ton of resources, only 30% of people who ask for assistance for their rent get it. That to me, and there's so many people who are then kicked out because they couldn't pay 1 month's worth of rent. And the county says there's no more money. And as someone who works really closely with people and has had to tell people, no, you don't meet these requirements, and trying to help them understand that and watching their faces fall, it makes me really want to reprioritize what we're really doing in our communities and why we're not paying attention to the people that really need it the most. So I've been having a lot of tough conversations with family and with myself and with friends to really dig at those really deep questions, as well as finding that time to reflect and take a step back, because it's very emotional work and very taxing physically, emotionally, mentally. And so knowing when you need to take a step back and breathe is something that I'm still working on too.
Sure. Morgan, I want to thank you. And I'm always trying to improve my game. And without a doubt, if there was anything ambiguous, my heart is always to seek and legitimize. Absolutely. And yeah, I want to clarify, there is no onus on the citizens stop with police. Police are encouraged and expected to police with excellence. And basically, I would say customer service. What I mean by that is the customer is not always right, but to treat the customer right. And those customers are also the citizens that are paying taxes to make sure that they're, pursuing it and remembering their oath. So I totally embrace everything you just said, and I'm glad you pushed back, because it was a great reminder. I have to include that in my discussion, because it's something that I teach at the academy as well. I only was highlighting, and I'm not defending myself. I was highlighting that there's a cause and effect. There's an action and a reaction, and I'm just giving a perspective on how officers view the world and how important it is. And I'll be quiet with this. The FBI did an empirical study on spirituality. The human behavioral scientists that originated in the 70s, you remember Silence of the Lambs, to kind of like study a murder scene, and they would then come up with good theories on who they should pursue as suspects. Those are scientists. Well, that group split into another unit because police executives were saying, boy, why are we losing our people? They go to the academy, and in the 7th year, the decision making they may have made may have led them to an indictment, maybe have led them to a 5th marriage, maybe they have now are addicting some sort of painkiller, and ultimately 300 officers active and retired a year wind up killing themselves. So where are we falling short in the industry? So they did an empirical study on spirituality, and this is what they concluded. It's not faith or denomination in that context. As a Christ follower, an officer led me to Christ, so I have a passion for men and women in law enforcement to know Christ. Well, putting that aside, the FBI said, hey, you know what? What shipwrecks an officer is not in the physical realm or in the cognitive realm. It's in the spiritual realm. And when you have a dispirited, angry officer answering calls for service, because it becomes the new normal on the continuum of a PTSD. I'm not making excuses for behavior, understand that, all right? But it's like, hey, what do we need to shift that. So thank you, because you opened up a lot of other information to go with that. So again, thank you, Morgan. Absolutely. The onus is not on the citizen. It's always on the officer, because we represent the trust of the community. But crime is not always only a police problem. It's a community problem. So that's why I have these programs of I work in DuPage, and we will probably come across. A little bit about my job is I'm the crime-free housing coordinator, for my municipality, and I work hand in glove with our 3 social workers in our agency, and I'm familiar with the outreach center and everything. So we'll probably cross paths, and I'm looking forward to that. But thank you, Morgan. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Can we real quick, the talk, this has been brought up several times, and I'd be a fool if I assumed anything, because I have assumptions that enter my mind. So Lindsay, would you and Bob share what is referenced with the talk?
Yeah, so specifically for my sons, we'll have a separate conversation with our daughter, but for our sons, our talk, which we have not had yet, because actually, Dino, this brings up questions that I kind of have for you. But, we don't want to raise our kids to be fearful of law enforcement. We've actually taken them to the police station to meet officers. And I think it's for both sides, because one, I want my son to see that they're good police officers and that these people are here to take care of us and to help us. And 2, that I want these officers to see, this is my adorable son who at some point will become a Black man. And a lot of signs point to the fact that he is a threat. And I don't want them to see him as that either. So we've tried to do things already to kind of start to have that talk. But the talk will be, you need to keep your hands where the officer can see them. So preferably out in front. You need to always communicate what it is that you're doing. So if the officer asks you to pull out your license, you need to say, okay, my license is in my back right pocket. I am reaching with my right hand. So it's all these steps. I think, Dino, you said it, that you had this conversation with your daughters to be respectful, and that moment is not the time or the place to get upset or angry. You take that later. You go, and you have that conversation with the superiors or wherever you go to. But that moment, your life is not, you getting angry and upset is not worth your life. And not that every encounter is going to be like that, where it's a life or death situation. I pray that it's not. But that is the conversation that many of my Black friends have with their Black sons.
Understood. Thank you. Solutions. Well, I gotcha. What advice do you have for people watching this video? How can they engage and make a difference?
Yeah, for me, I think it starts young. I think that's where we teach people to love each other despite what they look like. So as an educator, I'm really trying hard to figure out ways that I can bring some change into the education system. So actually, one of the things that I was talking about with my mom the other day is that I am proposing a class called Culturally Responsive Teaching, and I'm hopefully going to be teaching that to educators so that they can figure out and learn how to better teach to all different backgrounds, because education is not separate from culture and ethnicity. And I think that that's something that we have to start realizing and start teaching to and through our differences, because I think that that's what makes us special, that's what makes us unique, and that's what shapes our perspective of the world. And it's definitely going to shape their perspective and their experience in education. So I think that it's important that we start young and that we have some of these difficult conversations. And I appreciate that Morgan said earlier that she's been having a lot of these difficult conversations. They are really hard to have. Even, you know, on my end, I feel like it's hard to have. And it's a lot of what Bob was saying too, that a lot of my white friends are just apologizing over and over. And I don't want them to apologize because they personally haven't done anything to me. So I don't need them to apologize to me. I need them to walk beside me. I need them to teach their kids how to walk beside my kids. So yeah, for me, I think it just starts young. And like I said before, it is for me all about my kids and making sure that the world is better for them. And I'll just say one last thing is that, you know, with every revolution that we've seen, or every racial unrest that we have seen in our country, there has always been some backlash. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of it now. I think Bob kind of spoke to it earlier, is like, once all of this dies down, are people still going to have that attitude of walking beside us and still continue to make the change? But there's going to be backlash. And, you know, we saw it with the 2 young Black men in California who, you know, it hasn't really come out yet whether it was suicide or whether they were murdered, but I have a feeling that there is just, you know, there's some backlash that is going to start happening. And I want people to be aware of that, because I think it not only impacts Black Americans, but it's going to impact everyone, you know, of all different colors and shapes and sizes. And I feel like we just have to be able to stand together to combat that backlash.
Excellent. Lori, earlier you threw out the word courage, and it sounded like you were going to stop being so politically correct. I'm not putting you on the spot for that, but what recommendations or what ideas do you have?
Well, first off, I'm the oldest one on this call, so I get to call age and wisdom, and that's not a bad thing. 2 things. As an ex-educator, there is nothing better than getting to know children, because children are pure. And to teach children and to spend time with them and to see them together and how they interact should be a lesson for every adult. That's number 1. Number 2, I'm a big believer in volunteerism. Volunteered in many, many situations, but I will tell you that one thing that levels the playing field for all of us in our country and our communities is volunteering, helping each other out, doing the right thing. You know, encouraging people of all colors and ages and lifestyles and disabilities to get involved with Kiwanis, Lions Club, Rotary, go down and help clean out the park when we need to do things, because we're all human. Do what we do best, which is work together to reach a common goal. The stratas of people, you know, I don't do those things. I pay someone to do those things. You know, getting out of your comfort zone enough to just meet people where they are. Some of the best moments I have as an adult is when I am out in our community doing something for someone else. And I'm going to run into people from all walks of life when I do that. All ages, all colors. It's a beautiful thing. And I think that volunteerism is so overlooked as just a way of life. I do believe that's the way the Lord made us, is to be people that help others. I think that is in our genetic makeup. And to do that, I think, brings us all back to an even place and an even keel. Just talking is so important to do, and we don't always do it. We don't always do it. So this has been a joy to be able to do this and to listen to people's perspectives and to hopefully add a little bit. Our family is a little different. We're a little different. We're a little bit of a rainbow group. Lindsay said the other day, we've always stood out in our community. Absolutely, we have since day one. There were never a lot of families that looked like us. There are more now, and I'm grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. But it's okay that we look different, because we look different, we are people to be questioned and asked. And tell us about your family and how this family came together, and tell us tell us the good things and tell us the things that haven't been so good. And those are all lessons and values and things we can share that make everybody's experience fuller and better. I'm real proud of my daughter, and I'm proud of all my kids, but my daughter she can cut to the heart of it real quick. And so that's why this has been such a good thing to get on and do this with her. So thank you for the opportunity, Lance.
You bet. So what I've heard from a couple of us is engaging with youth, and a couple of ideas that popped in my head. There's an organization called Kids Hope USA, which is a mentorship program. It places an adult with a child. I understand it's in the middle school, could be late elementary range, and it's a very light commitment. From what I remember, it was a couple hours a week where you would go to the child's school, sit down and have lunch with the child to help with homework. There's Boys and Kids Club, which is a secular organization that would be the next notch up as far as getting in, committing, and mentoring and serving. A camp in St. Charles that was referenced earlier is Fox Valley Christian Action, also known as Riverwoods. I've personally been there to teach a class on computer networking. It was very boring. I put them all to sleep, except for one young lady. I remember her. She was highly engaged. The rest of them could care less. But that is I would go back to a light engagement where you could take your occupational skill or something that's awesome about you and bring it to high school aged kids and serve in that capacity from a mentorship standpoint. Lots of ways that we can connect to help make a change in somebody's life, and it's not a deep commitment, really isn't. Brother Bob.
Yes.
Your suggestions, solutions.
Oh, Lance, I don't know who's going to actually see this, but I'll speak it from my heart. I affirm everything that everyone has said in their suggestions. Those are very practical. You take steps to it. But if I could offer this, I mentioned a while ago that I dislike white folk, and because I was taught a certain way. When I realized that there's a broader perspective of life where it's just not Black, the Lord got a hold of me and some of those things changed. But I still had, even when I became a believer, I still had issues in me. And so just to add to the practical, wonderful things that's already been shared, I would encourage folks to really examine themselves. I think there are a lot of people that are hurting, that really need to get healed in areas of their lives. And I'll give an example. It's ironic that we're kind of in this situation now, and I'm speaking from a pastor standpoint. 400, many years ago, there was another group of a diverse group, tribal group of folk that were enslaved for 400 years, Israelites. And God finally released them to go. They go into the promised land, or they're going to the promised land. And, they have everything they need: quail, manna, the pillar, the cloud. And yet it takes them what should have took 11 days to get to the promised land. It takes them 40 years. And the reason why it took them that long wasn't because of the color of their skin, wasn't because there was something political. And in fact, they had laws, they had the 10 Commandments, they had the policies and the procedures, the initiatives, the programs. and they got to hang out for 40 more years. A whole generation has to die off. Why? Because there were things in their hearts that didn't change when they came out of Egypt. And so I think the things that have been shared, for those that may hear this and they're not necessarily connecting to the church part of it, and that's fine. I think what has been shared are great practical things, and I would highly recommend folks tap into everything that everyone has said. But I will tell you, for me, somebody has asked me the other day, said, you know, when we have these type of crises, I never see you get upset about it. And they asked me why, and I said, I don't get upset, but it does grieve my heart because we're continuing to deal with this. But the reason why I don't is because I've gotten healed of stuff in my life. And so I just think that's something that people really need to consider. Again, it's that whole, how can I help? You know, I want to help, but I don't want to take a look at some of the stuff I may need to take a look at so that I can be effective in helping. So Lance, that's what I would offer, just to encourage people to, you know, get healed in some things, and then just take some simple steps. I think we tend to make things grandiose. You know, we got to do something big to show people, you know, I'm helping the Black folk, or I'm helping whoever. Sometimes when we have this type of crisis, I believe there's times where God just kind of says, you know what, just love the one in front of you. Just love the one in front of you. You know, you ain't got to make it a big grandiose thing. Just love the one in front of you. And so I know it doesn't necessarily is a practical thing to some of the stuff everyone else has wonderfully shared, but I will tell you, I could not stand white folk when I was growing up because I was taught a certain way. But when God got a hold of me, that changed. But even when I had God in my life, the Lord in my life, I still had stuff in me. And it wasn't until I got healed of those things through Christ that changed. So I don't lose sleep. What's going on? I sleep very nice, very comfortably. And so, but it's because I got healed of stuff. I deal with racism every day, every single day. I'm sure Lindsay can attest to this. Every single day since I was 10, there's not a day that has gone by where I've had 3 to 4 incidents of either racism or someone being racist. And you have to know what that means when you say racist. But what I've done is that I have prayed for them just knowing, you know what? They just don't know. Somebody taught them to be that way, so they just don't know. And that's how I've gotten healed through the process of things. That's been the result of me being healed, that I'm able to pray for somebody and just hope that, you know, they kind of see things a little differently.
If I could take what you said, I just want to be, you know, my normal obnoxious self. In order to honestly and genuinely serve somebody else, you got to get over yourself first.
Yeah.
Going back to white guilt or whatever, I think it's not genuine. It's not authentic if you want to serve because there's protests and riots going on.
Yes.
So how do we respond today?
Yes.
And
Yes.
2 weeks later, they forgot that it happened.
Yes, absolutely.
You have to, I define personally, for me, I'm a very simple person, and I have to take a concept, a giant concept like love, and I got to break it down. And so for me, love is intentionally selecting another person,
Yeah.
placing their needs and desires above your own.
Yes. There's got to be an honor. There's got to be a culture of honor.
Yeah.
Despite what has happened, and I'm not discarding what has happened, period, over the last 100 years. But if you want to change, there's got to be a culture of honor. And the other thing, real quick, we got to understand too, is that a lot of folk, particularly Black males, they're fatherless.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. You know, when you're fatherless and you don't have someone guiding you, then, you know, How are you going to react to the Father? You know, and so again, I'm speaking that from more of a church standpoint, and again, there may be some folks that would prefer some of the other practical stuff, and I say go for it. But I think if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty, to get to some of those practical things that have been shared, you gotta deal with stuff within yourself. We got a lot of Black people that are angry. They're burning down people's property. It's because they're angry. Okay, it's not necessarily the situation. The situation may be the manifestation, but the root is anger within them. And that's, you got to get healed of that. Get healed so that you can then be wise to speak into things.
Let's conclude this evening's session. I'd like to go around the horn one more time and have each person share just one wisdom piece. What have you gotten out of this evening, or what would you like to leave the audience with this evening? And Morgan, I'd like to start with you, please.
I've really appreciated being part of a conversation where we can all come with different perspectives and different views and recognize those without dismissing them, and still being able to have honest and civil conversations with everyone. I hope that these can continue in some fashion, and if there's a way for all of us to connect in other ways, then to continue to affect change, then that would be great as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. Brother Dino.
So there's emphasis on marksmanship and laws and procedures. I'd like to see equal, if not more, attention on, I call it spiritual leadership development in the industry, where police executives embrace and allow a spiritual development. And, a brief thing about me, there was a part of my career that I didn't make very good choices based on overreacting, and I dealt with those consequences. And the counseling came part of the punitive, the result, the consequences of my actions, and I didn't receive that. So how neat would it be to, in the culture of the law enforcement community, that it's just as common as your uniform, that there is an authentic chaplaincy program, peer support program, things that are offered so that officers on a daily basis can check in, decompress, and reboot, and to remind themselves of their oath.
That's awesome. Lori?
Know where these seeds will go from tonight. We don't know who will see this. We don't know how it will be carried through the community, who might want to re-engage or re-involve. But that's the beauty of it, is that these seeds are needed to be planted. They need to be nourished. They need to be taken care of, and we need to move these seeds along. If we get the opportunity to transplant some of this with other groups, we need to do that. It needs to grow. It needs to get bigger and stronger. And I've seen people that really care deeply on this call tonight. They care deeply about what's going on and how to affect positive change. And so for me, that's the takeaway tonight, that hopefully there'll be more opportunities. I have to look for them. I have to be open to them when they come down. I have to see them coming, and then I have to be willing to engage. So going forward, that's my thought, my prayer, my oath.
That's awesome. Thank you. Lindsay?
Yeah, I think a big takeaway is that, 6 individuals can sit down, and we may not agree on all the same things, and we may not be of the same political persuasion or whatever, but we can still have a civilized conversation. And what's really important is that people need to continue to share their stories. For me, it's just so much, it's so eye-opening when people share their stories. Maybe it's because it just makes it more personal, and I can see what they're going through and helps me to walk along beside them a little bit better. But I think that people need to continue to be willing to share those stories, and people need to be willing to listen. And we need to make sure that we're not, trying to overshadow those stories, but we're trying to listen and learn together. And like Bob said, I think we need to pray for this country. We need to pray for the leadership of this country. We need to pray for the people whose hearts are not healed, and have a lot of anger to get over. And we need to just continue to, look to God for wisdom and where he's going to take this.
Amen. Bob.
I'd like to challenge this group. Morgan kind of put something out there that I'm like, okay, here's a great example of what we can do beyond just this conversation. So Lance, I'm putting it on you, bro, since you kind of headed this up. But I would encourage us, and I know we got other folks listening, but this is more of a private family thing here for a second. I would encourage us to have the opportunity to get together. And let's continue to process. I mean, if we're going to have these type of conversations, we got to get from behind the screen and get at the table together. And I mean, literally, when I mean table together, I don't mean, let's break bread together.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just have a time to where we can kind of come and have relationship, because we have some of these type of things that happen. And what happens is we hit leaving the whatever, and we never talk again. But yet we done took up 90 minutes trying to tell people what they should try to do or trying to encourage people to do. So I like to jump on Morgan's bandwagon and say, hey, I challenge us to take another step and let's connect. Literally, let's connect and get together. And again, just continue to have some dialogue, but maybe grab a lunch or a dinner or whatever, coffee, whatever, but just to kind of keep that connection going. In regards to the takeaway, I'll just say this. It's not our fault that racism is sick, but it is our responsibility to make it well. Excellent.
And I accept your challenge. I don't think I really was too obnoxious tonight. I don't think I really offended anybody. So I think most everybody here would accept the invitation, Bob.
Yeah.
Excellent. I would like to leave the viewers with one thing. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. This has been so cool. This is not something I normally do. This was a calling. I want to thank that young man for bringing up that question. What can we do about this 2 Saturdays ago? I want to challenge all of the young men that were in that Facebook group, What's Happening in St. Charles, that were bomb throwing. The 2 young men who said they've gotten people fired from their jobs, I prayed for you too. There's an opportunity for all of us to grow up a little bit out of this, to become a little bit more mature, to get over ourselves a little bit so that we can put others ahead of ourselves. We can't serve others with a genuine heart if we've got issues, personal issues that are in front of us first, blocking that from happening. So this has been an amazing experience. I appreciate each one of you for stepping up and volunteering to do this. I'll put out an invitation after this. We will see how it goes. And I wish you all an awesome evening.